This is The Competitive Edge with Mark Divine. Welcome to The Competitive Edge. My name is Scott Britton, and I'm here to help you answer a question that we all have. How can I get an edge in my business and life? Each week, we're going to uncover how some of the most successful and inspiring entrepreneurs, entertainers, and thought leaders get an edge so you too can reach your full potential. Thanks for tuning in today. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of The Competitive Edge. Today, you are going to learn the secrets of building an unbeatable mind. I am honored to have Mark Divine, author, former Navy SEAL, and entrepreneur on the show today. Mark is just the picture of excellence and achievement and is somebody that is going to teach some amazing lessons in this episode. Mark joined the Navy SEALs in his mid-20s and went from accountant to the number one ranked SEAL in his class. He then went on to have a successful career leading and training some of the most elite warriors in the Navy SEALs, and then bringing those principles that he learned into business and now books. Mark is the founder of SEALFIT, which is a training program for both physical and mental performance. He's also the founder of training programs like Unbeatable Mind. We're going to hear about all of these things, the 3 books he's written in the last year, as well as some amazing insight on how to elevate your mental performance to achieve 20x the results that you want in your life. This conversation got me so fired up, and I think that you're going to walk away pretty excited about hitting your mind gym after hearing from Mark. Okay, Mark, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Scott. How are you?
I'm so excited. And, you know, it's not every day that you get to talk to somebody who's trained some of the most elite warriors around, both mentally and physically, built businesses, and wrote awesome books that have personally inspired me, man. So I just want to first thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm privileged to be here, so looking forward to it.
Mark, you have a philosophy called Unbeatable Mind that is just so captivating to me just from the name you chose. Can you talk a little bit about Unbeatable Mind?
Sure, Scott. Yeah, the philosophy is something that I've been living my life by for the last 10 years or so. And, I kind of came to it through trial and error. I've got a background, of course, as a Navy SEAL for 20 years. And so with that background, functional fitness was extremely important. Also a lot of mental training that I developed for myself, plus also, kind of did through the SEALs. But then I also got heavily into the martial arts. I've been a martial artist for about 25 years. So a lot of the training of the martial arts I found very, very useful for developing emotional control and my intuition, as well as my spirit. And then also yoga. I've been involved in yoga through Ashtanga and Vinyasa and some a lot of different aspects of yoga for about 15 years. And so anyways, those have been my influences. And through that process, I've come to understand that we're leaving a lot on the table as human beings in terms of our performance and capabilities. And I call this the 20X factor. And essentially what I'm saying is that you and I and everyone else is capable of at least 20 times more than they think they are at any one time. And we can tap into that potential through training. And so I elevate training to the same level as eating, sleeping, and hydrating. And yet I don't look at training just as physical training. I actually have a path I call the 5 mountain training path. And so I look at training as covering 5 fundamental capacities that we have as human beings. And those physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual. So in a nutshell, the philosophy of Unbeatable Mind is that we're capable of so much more, and we can unlock and tap into that potential through training in an integrated manner of these 5 mountains of physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual, capacities or intelligences that we possess, that we all possess as human beings.
Mark, I love it, and I want to dive into those specifically. But the first question I have is, when did you realize that we have this 20x potential? Was there a particular moment?
Well, probably there are a couple moments that really stood out for me quite clearly. One is when I was training to be a SEAL way back when, I think it was 1989. Now, I had gone from being a CPA, MBA, working on Wall Street, to deciding that was a complete misfit and that I wanted to be a SEAL. And I was fortunate enough to be part of a martial arts program back then with a grandmaster, one of these living masters. Is very rare to come by. His name was Tadashi Nakamura. And what he had us doing is, hardcore physical training, sweating on the dojo floor and beating each other up, followed by, long periods of sitting in silence in classic Zen meditation. And through that Zen practice, I began to develop a visualization routine. And so I was kind of combining, concentration with visualization. And I was just doing it on my own. It seemed to make sense to me. I'd use the visualization to help calm my mind down, and then I would practice the classic Zen. So anyways, fast forward to about 3 years later, after starting this routine and, being in the job of being a CPA, and I'm now 24 years old, and I start to kind of wake up a little bit because meditation has that effect on you, and to realize that I'm completely misaligned in this career, and that I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, actually. And so I started to, I made the choice that I was going to be a SEAL. I kind of shifted my training plan physically to start to, do the things that I needed to do to succeed in SEAL training in BUD/S. But I also started to develop myself mentally, meaning I started to visualize myself and to practice, mentally in my mind. And so that was pretty rare, at 24, 25 years old, to be practicing in my mind was new territory for me. But I took it on faith. It worked for me with my martial arts, and I figured I've got to do everything in my power to make sure that I'm not a statistics with the SEALs, because the chances of me becoming a SEAL were pretty low. I mean, most people don't make it. I mean, out of the thousands who try every year, we only mint about 175 new SEALs a year. And for officers, which I was a much smaller percentage. And so, it's like getting into the astronaut program. So I wanted to stack the decks in my favor. And Scott, what happened was, the visualization took root after about 6 to 9 months, to where I had the sense that it was my destiny to be a SEAL. Like I'd already won in my mind. And that was powerful. And so that, later, 25 years later, that's one of the things I teach, is that first we must win in our mind. It's super powerful. Then the second, your question was what, led me to kind of uncover this philosophy that we're capable of 20 times more. The second really powerful event was the actual Hell Week training of the SEALs. Again, happened at a very formative time in my life. 26 years old now, going through SEAL training. Actually, probably still 25 by the time I got into BUD/S. And the Hell Week training, as you're probably aware, is 6 days long, 5 days, no sleep, around the clock training. So you're training for hundreds of hours, around the clock, nonstop, hardcore physical training. And it's intense, it's intense. And what happened for me was, I went into it expecting that my body and mind would, falter, and I'd just be clinging on for dear life, but I wasn't going to quit. And what I found is by like the third or fourth day, I was getting stronger. And I had the perception that I was gaining clarity, even though I think that was a false perception now, but I was getting much stronger, and people were quitting around me. And because I had done all that mental training, and because I had a sense of certainty, I really understood my why, my purpose for being there. And I was totally jazzed to be there in spite of the fatigue and the constant numbing cold, that I actually got stronger. And I found myself to be, capable of more than anything I could have imagined. It was a super powerful experience.
Let's talk about the specific types of visualization that you are doing and what you teach today, because this is actually a practice that I do myself. And you're right, it is insanely powerful for changing our belief structures, our confidence, our conviction, even before we actually do something. Can you dig into that a little bit?
Sure. Well, visualization, is one of those things, as you're aware, Scott, that it takes some time and some refining. It really, what it is, we're learning to use our mind in a new way. I write a lot about this in my books. Now, the thing about visualization that's really cool is that it's one of those ways that we can tap into our whole mind concept. And so in the West, we've mostly been taught to use our rational linear mind to think, to solve problems, cognition. And what I've come to believe is that represents about 10, maybe 15% of our total thought power, mental power. And our entire nervous system is part of our mind. Our heart and our bellies are part of our mind structure. Our mind exists even outside of our body. It's just a very, it's just a mystery, and science thinks the mind is just the brain. And if we map the brain, then we can recreate the mind. And that's just simply not true, in my opinion. And so the language of the rational mind is words. And yet the language of the other part of your mind, the 90%, your subconscious and your heart and your belly and your intuition and your emotional intelligence, the language of that is essentially imagery and sensations. And so when we're learning to visualize, it's like learning a new language. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Assessment?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, so first thing we have to do is, if I were to like stair step people through the process, the first thing we have to do in order to learn that language of visualization and imagery is to get control of our rational mind, because we've let it be so dominant for so long that it's hard for us to think that we can think another way. So first, in order to do that, we have to really stop thinking, right? It sounds kind of counterintuitive. We have to stop thinking with our rational mind so we can open up the thinking of the rest of our mind. And that's really where what the meditation did for me when back in the 80s, late 80s, is that I started to meditate, not really understanding what was happening. And what I was doing was stopping the rational thinking. And then that I was allowing the rest of my mind, it like cracks a door open to the rest of your mind. Now, once that door is open, and this is where meditation training stops, is like, okay, great, you've cracked that door open, and sure, you're going to have now insights and, creative bursts that filter through. That's all fine and good, and we want that. That's the next step, really. And you would pay attention to that stuff. But the visualization then is a way to then go deeply in through that door and to communicate and to plant seeds of future desires, future plans, into that subconscious mind where it can take root. So the first process, like I said, is to sit down and quiet your mind. You can do that in any number of ways. We teach a few with Unbeatable Mind.
Let's give people one way to quiet their mind real quick.
Okay, well, just literally sitting down and doing a breath awareness is a great way to do it. So, and this can be done by anybody at any time during the day, just to close your computer, close your door, and literally just bring your attention to your breath and then deepen your breath cycle. So you're doing a 4-count inhale and then a 4-count exhale. And then we like to add a little hold at the top and the bottom. I call it box breathing, which is an incredibly powerful technique for, getting control of your mind, because it also has a great stress management, effect as well. So that's one way to get control of your mind. It's just literally slow down and stop thinking. And what happens when you actively stop thinking, you do that by concentrating on something, on one thing. That was kind of the Zen approach, concentrating on one thing, and that was the breath. Just concentrate on the breath, nothing else. If a thought comes up, just acknowledge it, let it go, come back to the breath. And so now you're slowing your mind down from a beta to an alpha state, which is about half the brainwave cycles per second. And that slowing of the brainwave patterns, that's the correlate to what's happening in your mind, in your consciousness, which is a sense that things are slowing down, time is slowing down. And that's when you can kind of, metaphorically crack that door open to your, to the rest of your mental person. So
tactically, if you're trying to focus on one thing, and because I've done a lot of meditation, and I think one of the biggest challenges people have is they sit there, they start to work on their breathing, and then next thing before they know it, they're thinking about what they're going to eat for breakfast or whatever it may be. I mean, the best strategy for that is to just revert back to the breathing. What do you usually tell people who have trouble?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's very common. The Buddhists call it your rational mind, the monkey mind, when it's untrained. And so this is getting the heart of the matter, is that we got to train our minds. Our minds have been running amok, and we've trained it to be super, IQ smart. And unless you get into a martial art or, endurance athletes have better time controlling their mind because they have to spend long periods of times, kind of in a run or a swim or a bike. And so, breath control and mental control become more common to them. So they understand the language pretty quickly, I find. But, so what we do is we collapse it's not really meditation, Scott. Meditation is thinking of nothing. It's like just pure presence. Mm-hmm. So what we do is concentration. It's a bridge to meditation. And so what I'm saying is, you forget about meditation. We're not going to have to put a turban on or a gi or wear some fancy clothes. We're literally just going to learn how to concentrate better, which is a great tool for any professional, right? Whether you're a businessman or an athlete or whatever. And so we're going to learn how to concentrate. And so in order to concentrate, we have to concentrate on one thing. Now, if you like reading, maybe you concentrate on a Bible verse and try to memorize it, right? Or, but what I find is the breath awareness is super powerful because you don't have to carry anything with you. You don't have to do anything special. It's just right there for you all the time. And so you just focus on that breath. And like you said, when a thought arises, because it will, the whole point is to not to dissect your thinking organ, and so you can't think anymore. This makes you think better. It gets you in control of your thoughts, and then you can be more directive with how you think, what you think, and you can also eradicate any negative thinking, any thinking that's not productive for you and leading you forward. So this training has a huge effect on your ability to achieve goals, because not only are you able to focus on the goal that you do select, but you're able to be much more conscious about selecting the right goals. Because you're able to think more clearly, because you're able to focus on that one thing and really, really get into, the essence and the meaning and the importance of thinking about. And I guess more specifically to finish this dialogue here is that when thoughts arise, you acknowledge them and say, okay, that's interesting. Where did that thought come from? Then just let it go. So you can examine the thought, and then you can let it go, or you can replace the thought and with something else that's more positive and powerful, right? And so there's a whole host of options that start to arise when you gain control. Now, one last thing I will say is I use this concept of the witness. So what we do when we're learning to concentrate is, when we're just concentrating on a breath, right? We're literally just seeing the breath coming in and out, feeling the breath coming in and out. Then when a thought arises and you say, oh, there's a thought. Well, who's seeing the thought, right? It's an interesting question. Who's the person seeing that thought or experiencing that thought arising? Well, it's you, of course, but it's your witnessing self. It's your deeper kind of self. You become less identified with your thoughts, and that then gives you that choice back. That space between the thought and the reaction, or the thought and the response. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I want to talk about transitioning now into visualization once you've achieved, I guess, a quieter mind or a more concentrated focus. Just before we get into this, because a lot of people are going to hear this and they're going to think, these guys are crazy. This doesn't work. Yeah. I'm not going to sit in it with my legs on my knees, folded on my knees, thinking about the things that I want, and they're magically going to appear to me. Because the truth is, getting anything you want takes hard work.
Takes a lot of work.
And sacrifice. But this is an insanely valuable tool. And I want to first talk about, before we kind of set this up in a way that talks about some of the ways that visualization can be so powerful.
Right. So once you've learned to control your mind, then, like I said, the language of the subconscious, your creative subconscious, is visualization and imagery. The way that I teach imagery is first, get clear. There's a few ways to use it. Let me speak in more broader terms. One is to become the kind of person that you need to become to achieve your highest aspirations in life. I call that a future me visualization. And that's essentially what I was doing when I decided I wanted to be a SEAL. The first thing I needed to do was to visually see myself in my mind's eye as a SEAL, as the kind of person who was worthy of wearing the Navy SEAL trident, who was capable of being a SEAL leader, who was had the self-esteem and the honor and the integrity and the courage to become a SEAL, be a SEAL, and to succeed in that. And obviously, I was a different person than I was at the time. I was a CPA and I was an athlete, but I wasn't a SEAL. And so I had to conjure that image in my mind. It had to be, very powerful and infused with emotional energy, let's say. And I had to practice it in my mind until I actually believed that I was that person. Does that make sense? So that's a future me.
Got it.
Yeah, and we can also do skill development in our mind's eye. Now, my first experience with visualization as a skill development process was in my competitive swimming careers. I had a swim coach at Colgate University who was pretty advanced and was trying this out in the 80s. And so he had me visualize my stroke, which was a 200-meter breaststroke, with a stopwatch at night before I went to bed. And I tell you what, this is brutal, especially for a 20-year-old guy. And I was half the time I was just saturated with beer, and the other half I was
sounds
chasing.
mildly familiar.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it does, coming from Princeton. So, but I was serious enough about it, and I trusted him enough that I spent the time to actually do it. And it took me almost 3 to 4 months before I could even swim the entire race in my mind's eye. When I started, I could literally get maybe a lap, and then finally I could get like halfway through it. Eventually I was able to swim the whole race, and then I kept practicing it and refining it. And, after about 9 months, I was able to swim pretty consistently the same time. I'd click the watch when I like metaphorically dove off the blocks, and then click it again when I touched, the pad at the end. And I was getting the same time almost every time, or really close. And interestingly enough, the time was about 3 seconds faster than I'd ever actually swum in the water, until the final championship race, when I jumped in the water and swam that exact time, or damn close. And it just had a profound effect on me. Like, holy shit, I had swum that in my mind, and my body and psychology knew that I could swim that. And it wasn't until I swam the race, when the stakes were so high at the championship, that I actually swam what I was capable of in my subconscious.
Yeah, that'll make you a believer.
Yeah, it totally did. And again, that we call that a practice visualization. So you can use this to practice skills. I used it to practice martial arts skills when I was trying to refine them. I teach this, to my SEAL Fit athletes, while we're going through and demonstrating a lift, we have them visualize it, happening perfectly with perfect form and safely. We visualize it in our mind's eye. And, you can practice skills just as easily as you can practice becoming a type of person, or having the attributes of a new person that you want to become. Those are two pretty powerful ways. There's others, of course, but those are two that are probably pretty relevant to your.
Yeah, I really like those. I think a lot of my audience and the people listening are people that are entrepreneurs, people that are in business. What are some of the ways that you could use this technique in those settings?
Certainly, yeah. I use this all the time for my business. For instance, we want to get clear about our vision for our business, and the vision that can be seen very clearly and articulated visually is going to be more powerful than one that you don't have a very clear vision on. I mean, that sounds pretty obvious, but then just like the future me that you do for yourself in terms of becoming the kind of person. You want to do that with your business, right? Or let's say your project, or whatever it is that you're working on, your main thing that you're working on right now. And so, like, for instance, for me, I visualize where I see Unbeatable Mind, in 10 years. And I see it very clearly. Now, all the details don't have to be worked out. I just want to see kind of the result, the outcome. You know what I mean? So I see millions of people being influenced by Unbeatable Mind through my books and through seminars and digital training that I offer. And I have I see myself filling the shoes of the type of person that can deliver that credibly and authentically. And so I visualize my business, in the future, and I try to get more and more clear. And I come back to that, pretty much every day, and make sure I touch on that. So that's one way. Another way I use, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, are there tactics? Because I think a lot of people that try this visualization stuff, they do it and they see their ideal business. And then 3 days after they're doing this, they're like, okay, this is boring. I'm seeing the same thing. Nothing's happening. How do you stick with it? And then how do you get the most out of this practice?
It's such an excellent question. Essentially there's a few things here. One is we have to elevate mental training mental, emotional, intuitional training and spiritual training to the same level as physical training. And so many people think, I'm going to go, I'm going to schedule 3 or 5 times a week that I'm going to go to the gym or the CrossFit, do a CrossFit workout or whatever is their thing, yoga. And then you just leave it at that. And they think, okay, well, that's it. Well, every one of those training sessions is an opportunity to do mental training as well as intuitional training and spiritual training. And so yogis, people in your audience who are doing authentic yoga, get this right away, and they'll be nodding their head and go, yeah, okay. If you got a good yoga practice, then it is a integrated training practice where you're getting some physical benefits in flexibility, durability, core strength, but you're getting a lot of mental and emotional and spiritual benefit as well. So it's an integrated training. And the way I teach SEALFIT is to turn every workout that we do into an integrated training session as well. So we practice our breathing. We practice box breathing before every workout, and we practice our visualization. And I'm not, saying that everybody does it because I can't tell. I'm not inside their heads, but it's something I teach. And so those times that we actually go to train, quote unquote, instead of just training your body, use it as an opportunity to train your mind. And so, spend 5 minutes breathing and visualizing every time you work out, either before or after. The second thing that I would recommend and that I have my trainees do is a morning and an evening ritual. And these rituals can be 5 to 15 minutes long. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it's where we're going to then practice those skills that are, again, non-physical. But it's still a training session. So we practice our breathing, we practice our visualization, and we practice our concentration, and we connect to our higher purpose, and we then connect all that to our main vision / purpose / goal that we're working on at this stage in our lives.
So first step is to elevate and assign in equal or more importance to this as we do to other things. When we actually start doing the visualizations, though, how do we make this less of a mundane experience and one that's unique every single time we sit down and do it?
Well, it's not going to be unique every time you sit down because it's training and practice. So just like, every workout you do isn't completely unique. I mean, I know we have a lot of variety with functional training and we try to make every workout distinct, but for sure, every workout we're moving load and we're moving our body and we're sweating. And, sometimes it's just incredibly fun and sometimes it feels like work. The point is to discipline yourself. The whole idea of discipline is to be a disciple to something that is going to make you better, right? Mm-hmm. It's got a lot of meaning to you. And so when you're a disciple to your training, then you do it every day because it does feel good when you're done and you acknowledge that, and B, you understand the impact it's going to have. It starts out with, you have to have some belief and some faith. But then very shortly, within 3 months or a lot of times less, you start to see the results very, very richly. And they show up in places that you may not expect it, right? You may have, people come to you and say, gosh, Scott, what have you been doing? You just seem so much more grounded or centered or peaceful, or, you're being really productive. Last year, Scott, I wrote 3 books. One of them became a bestseller in New York Times. The other one, Wall Street Journal. Both of them Amazon, and the third one was self-published. And I just sell a lot of those to my membership. And I wrote those all in 1 year, using the techniques that I'm talking about. I had the vision. I disciplined myself to keep my training alive every day, and then I was able to focus very, very intently on the mission of getting these books written. And I didn't stop until they were done.
Sounds 20x to me.
Yeah, totally. That was funny. I'm not saying I'm ever going to do that again or that it was a good idea. I'm just saying that stuff works.
So I think actually the number one thing that people listening to this interview can get out of it is just general awareness that mental training and instilling their proper mindsets, beliefs, all the things that come with it, they need to be elevated and more mainstream.
Absolutely.
That's my personal.
That's a huge message, right? How to do that is a subject to many, a lot of discussion and training, and people might have different paths. Let's say now, Unbeatable Mind is my path. It works really well for me and my trainees because it comes from a Western perspective. It is very much a simplified and powerful belief system, and I teach it as if I'm teaching a bunch of, people who want to be Navy SEALs or want to think like a SEAL or have that kind of approach. And it's not like new agey or, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't have the cultural nuances that a lot of quote unquote mental training might have, It's just very practically oriented toward performance and becoming a better person. So elevating mental training to the same level as physical training, elevating integrated training, and taking all your training and making it integrated training. Now that's a huge distinction, because here's one thing that a lot of my trainees say. People who are very, very successful in all walks of life say, yeah, I've been working out for a long time and I've done yoga for a long time. And I even meditate, but they weren't connected, and they didn't, seem to really build off of each other. And so it felt disjointed until I found Unbeatable Mind. And then what happened is, all of a sudden I'm doing these in an integrated manner. I understood how they all supported each other, and it did unlock, like it was a final key that unlocked the performance, that 20x performance that I was talking about. And so it's integrated, the training, and it's this approach is so important because it leads to accelerated learning. And it's kind of like the saying, why kids don't learn in the linear, industrial age, public school system is because it's not integrated, right? They're not immersed. They're not learning at all levels. They're learning one-dimensionally, right? Hierarchically, top down, memorize this, memorize that, regurgitate it. But then you take them out and you put them in a Montessori or a Waldorf setting, or, some of these better, more nuanced approaches, and they're able to immerse themselves and learn physically and emotionally and intellectually and intuitively, and all of a sudden, they just soak it up like sponges. Well, this is what I'm trying to do with the adult learners of Unbeatable Mind, but the whole content of the process is learning to learn, right? And learning to be a better person, and learning how to think, in ways that are going to make you more productive and powerful and peaceful, and, try to elevate your consciousness to a higher level, so to speak.
It's like when you read a book and then you don't take any action, and there's no integration of the actual content.
Exactly. That's a great, and then reading the book is interesting, but, that's just really the first step to like download some content. And then you got to work with that content.
Yeah, absolutely. Two other mindsets that I wanted to talk about that really hit home with me was the first one is taking an offensive mindset.
Right.
Because I don't know if I feel like my generation is soft as hell, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel like we're just so focused on protecting ourselves throughout our every single day, every single thing that we do, instead of aggressively pursuing what we want. Can you talk about just this idea of an offensive mindset?
Sure. Well, first of all, in life, here, let me start by saying that I was adventurous and risk, oriented probably before I joined the SEALs, but the SEALs, hammered it home. And it's that's a super risky endeavor. And, I highly encourage any listener who's thinking about that path to come visit us. But, because it's an extraordinary career, it's very, very limiting in terms of, how many people can do it. But that mindset of, leaning toward risk, of metaphorically running toward the sound of gunfire and diving into something and risking failure is extraordinarily powerful. And that's what I mean by offensive mind, because that's where that's where the juice is. When you lean into something hard and you risk failure, and even if you fail, quote unquote, that's great, because now you've learned something new. You've learned what doesn't work. You've learned a limitation that you can now overcome. And you don't shirk from that lack of success. Now you lean into, how to do it right, how to do it better, how to find victory where it's at. And so the whole attitude is one of failing forward fast and learning to learn by getting out there and getting dirty. And, entrepreneurs get this, and, it's super, super powerful because it builds courage and confidence and momentum, every time you step into the arena and stub your toe.
How does somebody who's maybe been living defensively and living in a way to protect themselves, how do you start to build this offensive mindset where you're leaning into fear, leaning into things that are hard?
Well, like you said earlier, first they've got to win in their mind. So they have to start setting the conditions for being more pro risk in their mind. They have to see themselves as the kind of person who can step into greater challenge and step into greater risk. You probably are completely in sync with this next statement, but there is energy in boldness, right? There's magic in boldness. Every time that I've taken a really bold action, I've been rewarded with a bold response, right? Either a great insight or some reward in the form of, success or even partial success. And so it doesn't, it's not any harder to think big than it is to think small, with the exception that we, our own limitations of, your thought processes around what your capacities are and what your limitations are. And so that's why the foundational belief system's got to change to where you truly believe that you're capable of 20 times more. And then you go out and prove it to yourself. And one of the, how can you do that on a practical matter is probably going to be your next question. Well, I ask people to go challenge themselves with small bites first, so step up their workout program, step up their training and commit to their training, make a habit out of the mental training. So there's two huge things right there. And then to visualize yourself every day becoming that more courageous person, and then to challenge yourself again with something a little bit more significant. Some of the training we do at SEALFIT is all about challenge. We've got a 20X program, which is 12 hours of nonstop training. Well, that's really challenging for a lot of people, but it pales in comparison to the Kokoro camp, which is 50 hours of nonstop training around the clock, no sleep. And, that's obviously based off of my Navy SEAL Hell Week experience, but you do those training events and wow, you come out of it with a completely new concept of what is possible for you as a human being. And anything that you attack later on that's hard, you compare it to those experiences and you're like, wow, it's not as hard as that. You know what I mean? It's like for me, whenever I do something hard, I can compare it to Hell Week, or, even a lot of missions I did as a SEAL, which were far harder than Hell Week. And I'm like, this is easy. There's nothing that'll ever compare to that probably again in my life, until I'm on my deathbed.
What do you think is the number one thing that limits people from achieving or maximizing their excellence, getting the abundance they want in their life?
I just think it's limiting belief systems, and those can all be changed. Our part of our mind is actually, metaphorically is like a computer, and we can reprogram ourselves. You look at someone like Richard Branson, you say, wow, that guy's really got it going on. Well, it's only because he was programmed at a young age to think big, right? Mm-hmm. And to not worry about his failures. This guy has started 600 companies. 300 have survived. That's a huge success rate, but 300 have failed. You know what I mean? He's batting 50%. So, wow, right? That's still a pretty good average, but it's only because he thinks big and he's willing to take that bold action. And that's just a thought process, right? And so, but, tying this back in, the thought process, how do you change? How do you reprogram? You got to get control of your mind. And then you got to plant the seeds through imagery. You got to see yourself as the kind of person who's worthy of taking that bold action. And then someone, who's willing to also step out and to take the action. Like you said, nothing happens without massive action. But that massive action, the seeds of it start from within. You got to win in your mind first.
Mark, do you do any stuff with incantations or affirmations?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the whole process, I didn't have time to get really into it, but the process of mental control, once you have control of the mind, then you can, like I said, start to use the visual imagery. And then it went in action, and throughout the day, we use, I don't use the word incantation, but I just use the term positivity. We have positivity statements that keep us focused on track and in a positive mental state. Because, without being in a positive mental state, both emotionally and with our inner dialogue, then we really are torpedoing our success. Because that negativity is going to infect other people, and everything just goes south from there. And same thing happens when you're around negative people. You start to get infected. It's like a virus, and then everything just starts to grind to a halt. So you've got to train your mind to be very, very diligent toward any negative thoughts or negative energy, whether it's external or internal, and then get rid of it, and then maintain that positive maintain that positive energy or positivity with a with a mantra or a positive statement. One of the ones that I like to tell people that I use, I actually started using it in SEAL training, is that I'm feeling good, looking good, and ought to be in Hollywood. And so I'd go out on a run, and as soon as the pain set in, I would just start saying to myself, I'm feeling good, looking good, ought to be in Hollywood. Feeling good, looking good, ought to be in Hollywood. And after about 5 minutes of that, the pain would have gone completely away, and everything felt lighter because, essentially it's not much different than focusing on your breath. My mind is now, focusing more on that, or at least a chunk of my mind power is focusing on that. And everything starts to, kind of settle into a nice flow state, and the whole run would just slip by me in a much more, endurable manner, let's just say.
Yeah, my personal one is I'm unstoppable.
I like that.
And I just keep telling myself. I was actually in the gym today hitting a PR on a lat pull down and just telling myself I was unstoppable when it got really tough, and it was easy. And
nice.
It's so funny. This idea of transformational vocabulary, it just needs to be so front and center, because the way that the way that our mind works, and I feel like I'm not supposed to do this as somebody who's the interviewer, but I'm so passionate about this that I want to make sure this gets out there. Is that like the questions that we ask ourselves, the words that we use, all that self-talk, it determines the actual experience of our realities. So when somebody, like, I have a journal that I keep in the morning, it's like, how you doing today? How you feeling? If I say that I'm feeling good, or if I say that I'm feeling stupendous and unstoppable, I'm going to actually feel different.
Right.
I'm going to feel the words that I use. And so just like every single time people are asking you questions, or you're being cognizant of the self-talk that you're going inside personally, like just having those empowering words, and you talk about this in the SEALs way, having those empowering words that you use to describe your state, how you feel, what you're doing, it's just a game changer, because it becomes reality.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, at first it may not feel like it, but over time, right, especially if you're doing, the other training that we've talked about, it will sink in and overwrite some of that negative or disempowering, belief systems. So it's very important. In fact, you kind of touched on, and we've talked around it, but we have an Unbeatable Mind, and it was in the Way of the SEAL book, but something I call the Big Four of mental toughness. And they're like the 4 critical skills that you just can't do without to develop mental toughness and to perform better. And one of them is breath control, getting control of your breathing. And we talked about that a little bit. Another one is visualization. So we've talked a lot about that. And then the third is this, what you just referenced, this idea of powerful and positive, incantations, or, inner dialogue, and essentially maintaining that dialogue and retraining, rewiring your brain to always be, in that positive state, especially in challenging times. And then the fourth is learning how to select and to articulate proper goals for you, right? The right goals, and to make sure that they're time framed so that, you're not flailing around, but you're able to really focus in every day and nail, every day is going to move the dial toward, your vision as a human being.
Can you share a particular story where you leverage some of these tools to overcome something that you thought was insurmountable? Maybe the 1,000 burpee story would be a good one.
That's good. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's in Hell Week. That's probably a good example. It's kind of a fun one. Thursday of Hell Week, I mentioned I was getting stronger. I probably was looking a little froggy, to the instructors. That, we had 180 people start my SEAL training class. By the end of Hell Week, this Thursday of Hell Week I'm talking about, we had about 40 left. By the end of SEAL training, my SEAL training, we had 19 guys there. So out of 180, only 19 of us made it, and I was the honor man of my class, #1 graduate, which was pretty cool. And it's because I had these skills that I had learned earlier. Anyway, so like, how did this play out during Hell Week? Thursday of Hell Week, we had another 20, maybe 30 hours of training left, but we've been up since the prior Sunday. So there's no question I was tired, but I was still alert and feeling physically getting stronger, as I mentioned earlier. And so one of the instructors, maybe thought I was being a little cocky, or maybe he was just bored himself. And so he pulled me out of the ranks and said, okay, Divine, I'm going to get you to quit. Let's start with 1,000 8-comp bodybuilders, which is really like a burpee. Most folks probably know what that is. So anyways, I was like, okay, here we go. I knew right then it was going to be a gut check that, especially after not sleeping for 4.5 days. And anyway, so I realized, okay, I've got to use the skills. And so I broke it down. Okay, micro goals. Okay, all I have to do is 1,000. I have to do one ACOM bodybuilder 1,000 times. I don't have to think about doing 1,000. I just have to do one at a time. And then I have to do another, right? But all I have to do, focus on right now is just doing that one, right? And so then I said, okay, I can start there. So I started with one ACOM bodybuilder. Pretty soon I'm at like 20 or 30, just doing one at a time. And then, as the pain set in, I said, okay, I've got to breathe. So I'm starting to breathe deeply, which I had learned through my martial arts training. And I started to see myself as just floating, right? So visualizing myself just kind of floating, light as a feather, no pain, just relaxing, kind of like I was flowing through a yoga move. And then I started, kicking into my feeling good, looking good. So every ACOM bodybuilder, I would say, feeling good, looking good, ought to be in Hollywood. And then I'd, be back standing again. And so I employed the big four, and pretty soon I was at like 700 burpees, and time had, literally seemed to disappear in between, when I started to feel the pain and when I got to like 700. And I looked around, I remember kind of quote unquote waking up out of my little routine, and the instructor was so bored, he's like staring off at the rest of the class. And finally he looks at me, and I've got a smile on my face. He goes, "Geez, you could get the hell out of here, Divine. You're done." Like, you're not supposed to be smiling, is what he was saying. And I just had this great sense of, God, this is easy. I can do this. It's just one at a time. Easy day.
That is absolutely awesome. So I want to close this out here and land this plane. I have a feeling we could talk about this kind of stuff literally all day, and I'd probably have more energy than ever doing it. But one of the questions that I love to finish with here is just giving people one takeaway. And the name of the show is The Competitive Edge, and we want to give people an edge in their businesses and their lives. If you could give one snippet of advice for these people to get an edge, what would it be?
I'll tell you what, the one thing, my gift to your listeners is going to be to box breathe several times a day. And it won't take any more than a few minutes. But the process for box breathing is essentially you're going to exhale all the air out of your lungs, and then in through your nose. This is very important that you breathe through your nose as much as possible, at all times, by the way. But in through your nose, you're going to slow your breath down, and you're going to create like a nasal, like an ocean sound with it. They call that Ujjayi breathing in yoga, but it doesn't matter. So in through your nose, you're going to count to 5. And then you're going to hold your breath and count to 5. And then you're going to exhale through your nose, count to 5. And then you're going to hold your breath with the exhale, counting to 5. Now, if 5 is hard on the exhale, then just do 4. The point is not to we're not trying to make you better breath hold, swimmers or anything like that. This is a really powerful concentration drill that has, I mentioned earlier, the super powerful effect of also shutting off shutting off that part of your nervous system that is involved in the stress response, right? Mm-hmm. So by breathing deeply into your diaphragm, you're sending a message of calming to your nervous system. And, you literally are maintaining a really, really calm physiology while you're focusing your psychology, you're focusing your mind. And this is fantastic to do before any kind of important meetings or board meeting or, anything that, where your performance needs to be at its peak. This will help you get into kind of that performance zone or flow state. And you can do this type of practice. I do it in the morning, and I do it whenever I am not really using my brain for any, strategic or tactical thinking, but I'm just kind of going through emotion, right? Like driving. So if I drive somewhere, I'll practice box breathing. And instead of letting my mind just wander all over the place, I use that as training time, right? And I'll take little breaks during the day, lunchtime. I usually don't go out for lunch. It's great training time. And so I'll do some yoga and I'll do some box breathing. Or I'll take a walk and I'll do some box breathing. Or I'll go for a run and I'll do some box breathing. And then I'll usually do a short training session in the afternoon. Same thing, a little bit of somatic movement and then some box breathing. And then I usually do it in the evening. It's so powerful. And it is the bridge to all these other skills that we talked about, Scott.
Love it, Mark. So if people want to find out more about you, about SEALFIT, about Unbeatable Mind, where's the best places for them to go online?
Yeah, SEALFIT.com, all one word, SEALFIT.com, is a very inspiring web property of ours, and that's where I teach, functional fitness and mental toughness primarily. You can also learn about the Unbeatable Mind program there, or go to unbeatablemind.com, all one word, and that's where I teach these principles without, the hardcore fitness for those who aren't really into the hardcore fitness or don't think they're ready for it. I also, I think another great place to start is one of my 3 books, The Way of the SEAL, which is the one you read, published by Reader's Digest. That can be found at Amazon or wayofthesealbook.com. And then Unbeatable Mind, which is my self-published book. I love that. It's just very personal to me. That really talks about all this philosophy. Unbeatable Mind. It's available at Amazon in both hard copy and Kindle. And then my physical training guide for unconventional guide for physical and mental training is called 8 Weeks to SEAL Fit. And that's available at 8weekstosealfit.com or Amazon.com as well.
Mark, my wallet's going to be a little bit lighter after this conversation.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. You've taught us so much. You've motivated, inspired us. It elevated the importance of mental training, which I think could be a game changer for a lot of people's lives out there. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Before we finish up with today's Mindshare, I just want to say thanks for listening to another episode of The Competitive Edge. If you enjoyed the ideas in this episode and want access to all the conversations, tactics, and Mindshares we'll be sharing in the future, the best thing you can do is subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes. And while you're there, if you felt like this show has made a positive impact on your day, it'd be great if you could leave us a review on iTunes as well. Now, I know we covered a lot in this episode, and there might be a few key ideas or tools that you want to remember. So we went ahead and compiled all of the notes, links, and even a full searchable transcript of this conversation for you on lifelonglearner.com. That's life-longlearner.com. I also want to give you the details on a cool contest I'm running right now at lifelonglearner.com/fun. By entering the contest, you'll have a chance to win everything from Amazon gift cards to a free month of having your very own dedicated virtual assistant to an opportunity to come and hang out with me and my buds for a few days, where we'll teach you how to create your very own passive income stream. To enter this contest and learn more about everything we're giving away, head on over to lifelonglearner.com/fun. Do you want to build stronger relationships with your colleagues and business contacts? Then you're going to love today's partner, Newsly. Newsly is one of my favorite emails that I get in my inbox every single day, and it's pretty simple what it does. It tells me when any of my friends or contacts across all the social networks that I'm on are mentioned in the news. Now, this is valuable because when somebody does something awesome or newsworthy, I want to be the first one there to congratulate them. And honestly, staying on top of this is pretty hard for me to do, which is why my Newsly email is so valuable and often comes to the rescue. If you want to check out Newsly, head on over to newsle.com and you can find out all about this free software. It makes you a better networker, a better friend, a better family member, and it's just a delightful email to receive every single day. Okay, Mindshare time. So today with Mark, we talked a little bit about visualization, and I thought it would be kind of cool to share my morning routine and some of the things that I've found have been really helpful to optimize the visualization techniques. So every day I wake up, I get out of my bed, I go take my vitamins, I eat 3 Brazil nuts, then I proceed to meditate and do some visualization stuff within the meditation. And I actually alternate meditation on every other day. So one day I do a 6-step guided meditation done by Vishen Lakhiani. You can find it if you just YouTube 6-step guided meditation. And the other one I do is just like a series of exercises and things that I think about that my friend Ben gave me. And in both cases, I'm visualizing my ideal future, and I'm actually rehearsing myself living that and painting the picture of what it looks like. And I do this across multiple areas of my life because I don't just care about having success and abundance in one area. I want to have amazing health, I want to have wealth, I want to have amazing relationships, and a great business that provides a ton of value to the world. So those are the 4 areas that I tend to spend my energy
painting these visualizations. And I do the visualizations 3 years in advance, which is what Vishen recommends for a time period. And I think about what my life will look like in those areas. And every single day, like, let's just talk about, a lot of people on here are into improving business. Let's talk about business. So I visualize myself doing the particular actions of where I want to be 3 years from now. So things like me being on stage, speaking to a company about something that I really, really care about, and walking into the office and looking around and seeing 50 employees smiling, being jovial, loving their work because I've created the absolute best place to work in the world. And what happens is you'll start to do these, you'll start to feel really good. And you're subconsciously building conviction that you will get these things, that it is not a question, it is going to happen, which is the power here. And the challenge is, though, is that sometimes it gets a little old. People tend to think of the same thing every day, and like, this isn't working, I'm not getting any closer. And this is training, like Mark said, but one thing you can do to really get the most out of that is build upon your personal success in that visualization, as well as add finer details. So let's say that 3 years from now, you want to be starting a technology company, and maybe first you start out where you're working on an idea and you're visualizing yourself working on this product, being happy, sitting there at your computer, brainstorming, whiteboarding, all that good stuff. And then maybe 3 days later, you're visualizing, thinking about getting an email, opening up your inbox, and having an investor telling you that he wants to invest. And you think about what it feels like in that moment and how amazing it is. And then maybe a month down the road, you're visualizing, shaking that hand of that investor and feeling his warm embrace as you go ahead and get that check and go deposit into your company bank account for the first time, and how good that feels, and the phone call that you're going to make to your family and to your loved ones after you've made that deposit in the bank. And these are the type of finer details that are really going to make these powerful, versus like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a company. If that's what you're visualizing, you aren't doing the mental rehearsal. You're not living out in your own mind gym of where you want to be and where you will be with certainty. So these type of details are really important, so that when you are, in your going through the mental knife fight of trying to develop conviction and confidence about whether you're going to do these things, you've literally lived through them in vivid detail, so you know that you will. And I think what's been really powerful for me is, like, again, not only building on the details, but building on the success. So, starting out thinking like, I want to have a 50-person company, or I want to change the world in this way, or I want to have this lifestyle business where I have no employees, or whatever it is you want. And then, going from, I'm going to have a $500,000 a year business 2 months from now, I'm going to have a $3 million business. And this is exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to serve people and our customers in this way. And it's going to be even bigger than when I started off visualizing this technique. Because again, where you aim is where you end up. So build upon that success in these visualizations. So I really encourage you to go ahead and integrate this practice in your life. For me, the morning routine has been the best. That way I know that I can do it. Nothing else is going to get in my way. It's been an incredibly valuable practice. So I encourage everybody to go out there, check out the 6-step guided meditation. That'll get you started, and start building this into your life. Thanks again for tuning in, and talk to you soon.